Is it 2x3?
Before we begin this year's ceremony, I'd like to announce that we do have a contingency plan for the walk this year, since Mother Nature decided to bless us this month with 24 inches of snow. Jeddy Hood will announce the plan at the end of this program. If you would please remain seated after the musical finale to hear about the contingency rep, which will include both an inside and outside component of the walk. Now we'd like to wish you all good morning and welcome to West Bloomfield's 5th annual United We Walk ceremony. My name is Michael Schonberger and I'm a junior here at West Bloomfield High School and I'm one of the student co-chairs.
Good morning, my name is Carmen Woodruff. I'm a senior at West Bloomfield High School and I'm also one of the student co-chairs. Good morning, I'm Courtney. I'm a senior and I'm also a student co-chair.
We're all very thrilled that you all can be here today to take part in this wondrous, heartwarming event. We are also especially thrilled that we were all able to participate in this event in our newly remodeled school. Before we progress further into this program, we would like to take some time to make some acknowledgments of some wonderful people without which we would not be here today. We would now like to introduce this year's adult co-chairs, and if they will rise to be recognized. West Bloomfield Township Supervisor Jeddy Hood. Smart Transportation Director Dorothy Friedl. And West Bloomfield Township Trustee Stuart Brickner.
There are two special teachers who have put forth a lot of time and effort with the students who the program share. Students helping and respecting ethnicity. Mrs. Lori Saslow and Mr. Brody Miles. If you're in the auditorium, can you please stand? Their efforts to work with the club have made a big impact on our camp food drive as well as today's event.
Independence is a key word this year when it comes to students. The wall that you saw walking to the auditorium was created by 2 students. The money that was raised for these t-shirts that you see us wearing today was raised by students. And another student has decorated the auditorium with these balloons. They have definitely used this year's theme, Building Dreams Together We Will, to guide them in their endeavors. The student committees from West Bloomfield High School started preparing in October. We've held several student-run meetings, sponsored food drives, and traveled to most of the schools in the West Bloomfield School District. We've also sent out letters to describe the day to various students in Oakland County. At this time, we would like to acknowledge all the students. If you refer to your flyers, you will see the name of the 83 students who have contributed from West Bloomfield High School. Without all of you, none of this walk would not be possible. Will all the 83 student volunteers from West Bloomfield please stand? Also, any other students from West Bloomfield, please stand. Keep on standing. Any other students that came to walk from West Bloomfield High School, please stand. Remain standing, please.
Now all those from Orchard Lake Middle School, please stand.
Abbott Middle School, please stand. Please remain standing, people.
All elementary schools, please stand. Dorothy, Green, Scott, Roosevelt, Ely, and Bresco.
Now would all those students from Hillel, Our Lady of Refuge, and St. Mary's please rise.
We would also like to acknowledge all of our visiting school districts. If you are here, please stand. Remain standing, please. As you look around, one can see through our youth, we have made a part of Dr. King's dream come true. You may now be seated. We would like to thank Mel Farr for the buttons that he has graciously donated. If you will look at your flyer, you will see all other businesses and sponsors who have made today's event possible. We would also like to thank Orchard Lake Middle School Jazz Band for their lovely selections that you were receiving here. Now they will be performing Picking Up the Pieces under the direction of Mr. Douglas Blackwell. Without further ado, the award-winning Orchard Lake Middle School Jazz Band.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell and the Orchard Lake Middle School Jazz Band. 5 years ago, Mrs. Diane Ferguson and Mrs. Charlene Mitchell-Rogers presented a proposal to the West Bloomfield Board of Education to have a day off in observance of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day. They represented the Multicultural Awareness Committee from Orchard Lake Middle School. Because of the board's approval, their request was fulfilled. Later that year, United We Walk was proposed and accepted. Without this next individual support and encouragement that he has provided throughout that time period, we would not be here today. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the West Bloomfield School District Superintendent, Dr. Seymour Wetchko.
By 1967, Dr. King had received the Nobel Peace Prize, and he was invited to speak to the American Psychological Society in Washington, D.C. He addressed the most distinguished group of social scientists in America, and with the brilliant use of language that characterized all of his public speeches, he coined the phrase creative maladjustment. And he said, there are some things concerning which we must always be maladjusted if we are to be people of goodwill. We must never adjust ourselves to racial discrimination and racial segregation. We must never adjust ourselves to religious bigotry. We must never adjust ourselves to economic conditions that take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few. Men and women should be as maladjusted as the prophet Amos, who in the midst of the injustices of his day could cry out in words that echo across the centuries, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Or as maladjusted as Abraham Lincoln, who in the midst of his vacillations finally came to see that this nation could not survive half slave and half free. Or as maladjusted as Thomas Jefferson, who in the midst of an age amazingly adjusted to slavery could scratch across the pages of history words lifted to cosmic proportions. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And through such creative maladjustment, we may be able to emerge from the bleak and desolate midnight of man's inhumanity to man into the bright and glittering daybreak of freedom and justice. With these words, I welcome you this morning and hope this will set a tone for the rest of the morning.
Thank you, Dr. Gretschko. Before I introduce the student keynote speakers, I would like to make some acknowledgments. This year we held United We Walk essay and photography contests. We wish to thank everyone who entered. We would like to congratulate Scott Hammond and Sarah Brockman, the first and second place winners of the essay contest. We would also like to recognize and congratulate Meg Hogg, Diana Teeter, and Caleb Yono, the first, second, and third place winners of our photography contest. Their works, as well as many other photography works, are on display in the school's atrium. Please make sure you take some time to go look at them. Also, we would like to take this time to remind each and every one of you to sign our wall with reflections on how each one of us can build a dream. We would like to thank students C.J. Curtis, John Wayman, and teacher Mrs. Hanson for creating this beautiful wall. And now to the student keynote addresses. We are very fortunate to have this year 3 very talented student keynote speakers. These 3 students, as well as many others, auditioned before our panel of distinguished adults. These 3 student speakers each represent a high school and each of the 2 middle schools. They are here today to give their thoughts and feelings toward this year's theme, Building the Dream Together We Will. Without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Jadine Collingwood from Abbott Middle School, Jordan Maroko from Orchard Lake Middle School, and Dayna LePlatte from West Bloomfield High School.
Good morning. I'm Jadine Collingwood, representing Abbott Middle School with my speech, Building the Dream Through Determination. Determination comes from the word deter, to turn aside or prevent from acting as by fear, and the word termination, the end of existence. Therefore, determination is to end being afraid to do something. To me, determination is being strong enough to fight for your goals, to reach for your dreams and make them reality. Being determined is making a commitment to yourself. Everyone needs determination. No matter how big or small your dreams are, you can achieve them only by being determined. A person who has inspired me to be determined is Rosa L. Parks. Rosa Parks was not only determined to achieve her goals, but she encouraged others to have strong determination to achieve their goals. Rosa Parks changed the lives of people all over the country with her goal to educate busing. Rosa Parks had been out shopping and walking around a lot. Her feet ached terribly and were throbbing with pain. So she decided that instead of walking home, she would catch the bus. At the time, it was 1955, and even though African Americans had won their fight for freedom, they were not treated with equal rights. An African American was expected to give up their seat to a white passenger, and the passenger was to sit in the seat. Rosa Parks was determined to keep her seat. When she was asked to give up her seat, she refused to. Refusing to give up her seat led her to be arrested for violating segregation laws. The determination from Rosa Parks encouraged a boycott of the bus system by Black people. The boycott involved many grueling riots, the loss of many jobs, and many injured and lost lives. But with Martin Luther King Jr. leading the movement in 1956, bus segregation was ruled unconstitutional. This movement could have never been possible without the strong determination of Rosa Parks and of Dr. King to build the dream of an equal community. In our community, we must be determined to build the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. With the help of the whole community, his dream can be made a reality. Martin Luther King was a man with many dreams and aspirations. His determination led him to become the great man he will always be remembered as. He left us with one dream to live by. Together, we will accomplish his goal. Determination is a powerful word. When one is asked to be determined, they are being asked to make a commitment to their self and their future. Determination is needed in everyday life. You must use determination to strive for your goals. If a person tells you you cannot do something, being determined is the only thing that can prove them wrong. Determination is needed to make your dreams you want come true. To help yourself become determined, look yourself in the mirror and say, I can, and I will. I can, and I will. My commitment to the future is to achieve all goals I have set for myself and to encourage others to have strong determination to achieve their goals. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Maroko of Woodruff Middle School. Today, I will be speaking about the theme of this year's United We Walk, Building the Dream, Together We Will. Thank God we have a community to live in, especially in West Bloomfield. Everyone as a community takes on special jobs. Not only jobs such as an accountant or a lawyer, but the jobs that qualify you for these jobs. For instance, to get to be a lawyer, yes, you have to be hardworking, and yes, you have to go to law school. But you also have to respect authority, family, friends, and those with different racial backgrounds. There are still some people in our community that do not understand that discrimination and being prejudiced is wrong. This walk teaches people about how together West Bloomfield will build the dream of equality and respect for everyone. Inspired by the belief that love and peaceful process can eliminate social injustice, Martin Luther King Jr. was one of the most outstanding Black leaders in the U.S. In his short 39 years of seeing the world, Martin Luther King Jr. brought up so many important ideas, such as racial equality, elimination of poverty, and nonviolent resistance to oppression. He did have opponents, but after his assassination in 1968, his views were more widely accepted. He once said, all the money and effort put into the Vietnam War could have been used to combat discrimination and poverty. Some people criticized this belief because they thought that by following his views advocating nonviolence, that it would take too long to work. Also, because his statements that Vietnam attracted people's attention away from civil rights. You, I, and everyone else in West Bloomfield are a community, and together we will build the dream. Good morning. My name is Dayna LePlatte, and I represent West Bloomfield High School. Building the dream. Together we will. Is West Bloomfield a community where people are able to unite and live in peace and harmony? Are foreigners embraced or ridiculed in this community? Do people merely have a superficial relationship with others from a different background, or do we truly extend ourselves to embrace each other's racial and ethnic differences? Are we able to actually appreciate the cultural potpourri that makes this community so unique? Is West Bloomfield a community where people are able to get beyond a person's color, to like or even love one another for their intrinsic characteristics, versus identifying another as my Jewish, Chaldean, Asian, Mexican, or African American friend? Are there people in this community who are willing to step beyond their comfort zone to make sure that our community is truly a haven for equal rights and freedom? Will the spiritual and emotional warmth felt today during United We Walk continue throughout the days, years, and months and decades to come? Or will our love and respect for each other dwindle as we leave this school today? Will our only efforts to build the dream stop as we leave the parking lot? I challenge myself, my friends, family, and all community members of West Bloomfield to keep the dream alive by stretching and reaching outside of our comfort zone to truly relate and embrace the rich racial diversity that exists within our community. I challenge myself and others to boldly seek more than a polite, shallow relationship with others from a different background, so that a true understanding and brotherly love is innate within our community. I dare myself and citizens of this beautiful community to do some personal soul searching, to make sure that we truly put forth the best effort possible to end racism and sexism within the walls of this community. By answering these questions and meeting these challenges, we will continue together to build the dream. Thank you.
Thank you, student keynote speakers. Wasn't that so inspirational? It is good to know that great minds lies within the leaders of tomorrow. Now we will have a selection from the wonderful Abbott Middle School Show Choir under the direction of John Deirelein. They will be performing Hands United in Peace. The solos in the piece have changed. The new soloists are Nick Bennett, Ryan Reber, Benique Cousin, and Kristen Snyder. Please look in your programs or follow along as they sing words of humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, the Abbott Middle School Show Choir.
We're a world of many Mr. Deirelein and the Abbott Middle School show choir. Although student participation is very important, the adult planning committees are very instrumental in holding United We Walk together. If you refer to your flyers again, you will see their names. At this time, we would like to thank all the adult planning committee members to stand. We would also like to thank the West Bloomfield Clergy Association and the Community Forum for organizing the first ever interfaith candlelight vigil last night. Special thanks to Reverend David Robertson from Orchard Lake Community Church. All other teachers, administrators, and civic leaders who contributed, please stand as well along with the adult committee. We really appreciate your help and enthusiasm. It is an honor to have two adult keynote speakers who've had the privilege to work closely with Dr. King during the Civil Rights era. In a time when it was life-threatening to demand equal opportunities, Honorable Claudia Morcom, former Wayne County Circuit Court Judge, and Attorney Dean Robb, who was part of the first integrated law firm in America, took the initiative to defend the cries of injustice that existed in the South as civil rights attorneys. As you listen to their stories of strength, I hope that we will all be grateful for the diverse communities that we live in today. Attorney Dean Robb and the Honorable Claudia Morcom will also be at the luncheon to continue their stories in the cafeteria at 11:30 till 12:30.
I have a dream that every high school in America and every township and every county will do what you have done to promote the legacy and the honor of Martin Luther King Jr. That's my dream for all of us. What an unbelievable gathering this is. I'm in tears practically, and I'm an old guy. I'm not supposed to get emotional, but this is gorgeous. You know, back when we started, here we are. It didn't come through too well, but you recognize me there? Yeah, that young guy. What that meeting was about, and really my most intimate contact with Dr. King was at that meeting in Atlanta in 1963, early 1963, before the famous I Have a Dream speech. A few of us in Detroit, started really in our law firm, Goodman, Crockett, Eden, and Robb, and we made the brilliant decision to hire Claudia Morcom right out of school. And we started our own little civil rights movement right there in the office. I mean, for a white, I was kind of a hillbilly type coming from Southern Illinois. I made all the mistakes that you could make. I referred, when I spoke to a large Baptist church in Danville, Virginia, I said, "You people." Know about that one, Reverend? You people. I never even knew what I did wrong most of the time. But I was raw, but I was lucky because I had some great mentors and I had some heroes. And at that time, we didn't know, when we took that picture, we had no idea of what a history we were part of. We were just there. He was just out of jail. If you read carefully page 9 of this wonderful program, it tells about him defying, he and Reverend Abernathy had defied the federal injunction prohibiting marching and protesting against the horrors of Birmingham, Alabama. They had a police chief named Bull Connor. You've seen these pictures of the dog attacking the people, the kids. Well, Martin Luther King and Dr. Abernathy defied that injunction, and they were put in jail. And he came to that meeting directly he got out of jail. We didn't know for sure he's going to make it. He came to our meeting of lawyers, and these lawyers around there were the start of a committee that started here in Detroit called a Committee to Assist Southern Lawyers. So out of that meeting, Michigan sent over 200 lawyers who spent at least 2 weeks down in the South in the most terrible places fighting the Jim Crow laws that meant colored only at this water fountain. Blacks were segregated to the back of the bus, as we just reminded in Rosa Parks' case, and it was inhuman. The schools, so-called separate and equal, were a disgrace. And this was 10 years after Brown versus Board of Education ordering the public schools to be integrated. And Mississippi and Alabama were the worst in defying this. And that's where we went to center our protest. And Dr. King at that time, of course, had just been the successful leader of the Montgomery boycott, the bus boycott that amounted and ended up busting the sit in the back of the bus, and that's how Rosa Parks became famous. And he was the pastor of this church in Montgomery, Alabama, Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. And he, a young minister, held those people together with prayer and inspiration and courage, and they started the civil rights movement in the toughest part of the South. We then moved from Birmingham to Selma. Selma, Alabama is the town that I had the most to do with. Selma was a town where the blacks outnumbered the whites about 3 to 1, but there were 5 registered black voters in the whole county, and there was no blacks in anything except menial jobs. And then they formed these white citizens councils that every black that would sign a petition to integrate the schools or just make any kind of a protest, they had the Klan as being the dirtiest of the violent providers, but then the White Citizens Council came along, and the middle class and these nice people in the front rows of the churches would fire the blacks who raised their hand or signed a petition. They'd fire them and blackball them. They couldn't get credit, and literally starve people out. And that was the setting of the old Jim Crow South. And we were just a tiny part. Lawyers, we got people out of jail so they could go get in jail again. We sometimes wondered whether if we had it to do over again, we wouldn't have gotten anybody out of jail and just shut down that criminal South because he didn't have any more jail space. We didn't do that, but we thought about it. But anyway, out of our same office, and I just say this is to honor my co-speaker here, which started when our guild and our group of lawyers decided to open a law office in Mississippi. And I don't want to take in the things that Claudia is going to say away from this, but the first person down there to man that office was Judge George Crockett Jr., who you may have heard of. He later became a congressman. The second person to man that office, and she manned it for a whole year, was Claudia Morcom. She went to, when I think, what courage that took, because we were hated, we were taunted, we were called names, and to go down there and live for a year in that community and try to exist as she did, and she brought all the lawyers that went down there, worked with Claudia to take cases all over the South. Anyway, it's a great honor to be here. I hope we copy this program for America. That'll fulfill the dream. And you are such a lucky bunch, because you are growing up with not nearly the hatred and the discrimination sort of worked into your culture and your bones that we did. And I came from a Jim Crow high school in Southern Illinois, where the only blacks we saw were stars on the other teams, sports teams, because the blacks didn't make the team unless they were the star. And we heard those taunts and the N-word, and I'm glad that my hatred of that has lived with me all my life, and I hope you guys go out and fight discrimination. Fight it with a passion. Pick a hero. Do it.
Good morning, everyone. Well, we were sitting, waiting and listening to the young people and that wonderful Orchard Lake jazz band, Mr. Blackwell. They are fantastic. Dean kept saying, I'm throwing my notes away. I'm not going to say this. I'm not going to give that. I don't know what I'm going to say when I get up there. Well, he said enough for all of us and the way that we feel about what happened some 30 years ago. I treasure this opportunity to speak to all of you today, and every chance I get, I talk about that Mississippi experience, because most of the young people in the high schools and middle schools that we speak to now, of course, were never born during that period, and some of their parents were not born during that period. And it's a little difficult to relate what that experience was. And I have to ask myself this question, which I have over the years, and I'm sure you can ask yourself this question. What would possess hundreds of young people, many of them your age or just a little bit older, who were students, who were workers, who were parents, to go into and volunteer for an undeclared war that had never been recognized by the president or the Congress, would go into a war-like situation with no ammunition, no weapons, except hope and love and nonviolence and a dream? What would possess lawyers to give up lucrative practices and their families to go south for periods of time, upwards of a year or more, except their quest for social justice and to fight against injustice and a dream? And the doctors who came down, and the psychiatrists who came down, and the ordinary people, and those who were the local people, to fight against this, in this racist battle, in what was our South Africa of the United States, and to fight against apartheid at that time in Mississippi. It took courage, it took hope, and as Dean says, it took a passion for justice, which we hope some of you will feel that same kind of passion. The way I got involved in it, my parents are from Mississippi, and when I was a little girl, we used to sit around the dinner table on Sundays. They would talk about Mississippi and the segregated facilities and the no facilities for black people at that time. They would talk about having to step aside on the sidewalk when a white person would come, even if it was rainy and snowy and muddy and the levee had broken again and flooded. They would talk about the segregated drinking fountains, which said white or colored. There were no motels or hotels. When my mother and father got married, they had to spend their honeymoon on the road in a car on their way to Memphis, Tennessee, which had one of the few black motels and hotels there. They would talk about the segregated school system or no system of education for young people there. And so I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer from the time I was about 8 years old. And that gave me a lot of direction in my education and what I took in school over the years. But what really decided my going to Mississippi, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee came to Detroit at the home of Mizell Soul. I don't know if, Dean, if you remember that. Hunter Moray and Bob Paris, they brought with them photographs of the conditions in Mississippi and the sharecroppers. And they brought photographs of the poverty that the people lived in. And then they brought photographs of the rich white people, Senator Eastland and all of those who used sharecroppers really as slaves. And they had decided that there was going to be the summer of '64, the Mississippi Project. And these students from Harvard and Yale and Columbia and North Carolina and Howard and all of the universities had decided they were going down to integrate Mississippi, to register people to vote, to set up freedom schools so that they could learn to read and to write, so that they could be good citizens and good voters. And what they were faced with were church burnings and bombings. They were faced with killings, lynchings. The family that Judge Anna Diggs Taylor and I stayed with when we first went down in the summer of '64, ironically enough, was my mother and father's old college professor at Alcorn College. His name was Professor Saunders, and he had married a younger woman, and when he and his wife offered their home to us to stay that first week that we went down, I did not know this connection between Professor Saunders and my parents until we had been there for some time. And you have to remember that when you're in college and you're 16, 17, 18 years old, the professors in those days were only like 24, 25 years old. And so they weren't that much older than my parents. So he was in his 60s when we were down there, and we stayed with them the week that we were there. The week after we left, they firebombed their home because he had had these northerners and outsiders coming down and staying in their home. But when Anna Diggs and I got off the airplane in Jackson, Mississippi, we were met at the airport by Judge Crockett and some of the other lawyers he had recruited down there and his students, and they told us that the 3 civil rights workers had not reported in. They had been sent to one of the counties, Neshoba County, I believe, because of a church burning, to take statements from people. And the procedure that we used at that time was when you left Jackson, Mississippi, you called ahead and said, we're leaving, we're on our way, and it takes whatever, an hour to get there, and we should be arriving about that time. Then once you appeared at your destination, you called back to Jackson to say that you had arrived safely. What happened on that eventful day was the kids had gone, they had taken the statements from all of the people in the area, and had left, coming back to Jackson, and we never heard from them again. When we got off the plane and Judge Crockett confronted us with this situation, at that time Anna was married to Congressman Charles Diggs. We called Washington to tell them about the situation. We tried to get the FBI involved, but they said there had been no evidence of a federal crime, so they couldn't do anything about it. And we are convinced that at the time that we heard about the disappearance, that these young people were still alive. And had there been some kind of intervention or something taken over at that time, that we might have been able to save their lives. But James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman were murdered by the sheriff and the undersheriff and the people in Neshoba County, and their bodies put in their car and buried in a swamp, and it wasn't until sometimes later that they were found. Now, why would people come down to a situation like that, knowing that their life was in danger? But it did not deter them. More students came down, more lawyers came down, more doctors came down to work in the movement. And it was because they did have a dream. They believed that this country should live up to what its Constitution said. They believed that there should be equal rights for all people. They believed that everyone should have the right to vote. I'm going to leave you on this note because this is just a teaser. So when you come in for the luncheon, I'll tell you more about the activities that we were involved in Mississippi at that time.
Thank you very much, Dean Robb and Honorable Claudia and Morcom. At this time, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce to you, once again, a truly great man. 2 years ago, at this very program, I introduced him as the adult keynote speaker. Though he was unable to attend that day, he did speak to us via video. And his voice still filled the room, and his message still filled our heads and our hearts. A truly wonderful man who I am honored and very proud to call friend and brother. I'd like to now recognize Reverend Kenneth Flowers of the Greater New Memorial Missionary Baptist Church in Detroit.
We would now like to take this time and acknowledge our adult co-chairs. When I call your name, could you please step up to the podium, please? Our Township Supervisor, Jeddy Hood. Mr. Stuart Brickner, a West Bloomfield trustee. And Mrs. Dorothy Friedl, Smart Bus Transportation Director.
And now we would like to thank some people who worked very closely with the students. Right now I'd like to call out Mrs. Janet McBurney, Mr. Steve Wasco, and Mrs. Jeanette Port. And also, I'd also like to call up Mrs. Saslow and Mr. Miles.
This gift is from the West Bloomfield High School staff. Thank you.
And now, we would like to introduce to you, as a continuing United We Walk tradition, some West Bloomfield High School students who will be speaking to you in various languages, including a new language this year, which is sign language.
Shantichi Patiya Vartisavya. Hi, I'm Ishan Shastri and I've just spoken to you in Marathi. Welcome to United We Walk and walk in peace. Shalom Alochon, Shem Galochon, Ihu Dabraksha, Hayutha. Hello, my name is Jason Cato. I just spoke to you in Chaldean. Welcome to United We Walk and walk in peace.
בוקר טוב, ברוכים הבאים ליחד אנחנו צועדים. שתדעו בשלום. My name is Eliana Tracy and I speak Hebrew. Good morning, welcome to United We Walk. Walk in peace.
Yoragalt Emberek, Baldajuk Bejuk, Hajut Edyut Targut. Beret Hibanyuk. My name is Brooke. I speak Hungarian and American Sign Language. Good morning, welcome to United We Walk. Walk in peace.
Buenos dias. Bienvenidos a United We Walk. Caminar en paz. Hello, my name is Morgan Halliday. I speak Spanish. Welcome to United We Walk. Walk in peace.
I don't have a language, but I just want to revert. Yeah, I speak English. Well, welcome all to United We Walk. Reverend Flowers had told me that he would like to address you all.
I promised Michael that I would be here in person because I wanted to show my support to what the students and what the community of West Bloomfield is doing to honor Dr. King. And so I just want to commend you, and I echo the words of Dean and the Honorable Judge Claudia Morcom, because this type of program that builds bridges, that brings together young and old, and the various ethnicities and races, is the type of program that America needs to have as we honor the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His dream was a dream of uniting all of us, regardless of our race, our color, our creed, and our religion. And so I thank God today that West Bloomfield has given us a model, has given us a key concept that can be mirrored all across this country, to let America know, and yes, to even let the world know, that in the midst of racism, anti-Semitism, in the midst of classism and sexism, we still are the world, and we still can make a difference if we come together hand in hand. And so I just wanted to come to say thank you for allowing me to speak via videotape 2 years ago, but to thank you also for taking the time to honor Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I would charge you and challenge each of you that as you go forth and walk today in peace, remember the words of that Negro spiritual that says, walk together, children, don't you get weary. Walk together, children, don't you get weary, for there is a great camp meeting in the promised land. I charge you today, keep the faith, keep the dream alive, but not just a dream in your heart, but make that dream a reality in your lives by reaching out and joining hands and doing all that you can to make sure that this world will be a better world for every one of us. May God bless you. May heaven smile upon you. And until next year, keep the dream alive. God bless.